does me.
So everybody's got to acknowledge to continue the meeting, knowing that you're recorded.
We're all set to go, sir.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thanks everybody. It's good to have everybody here. You're all ready to go, Travis, right? And Joe, and so we can do a roll call now. Please proceed.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Commissioner Stevens.
Present.
Commissioner Scott.
Present.
Commissioner Rubis. Gotcha. Commissioner Hammond.
I'm here.
Commissioner Roughton.
Present.
Commissioner Bockert. Chair Wojciechowski.
Here.
Alternate Adams. Alternate Quarternick. Commission Liaison Broyles. Council Liaison Jaxie.
Here.
Council Liaison Nyan.
Here.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So thanks for everybody for attending. Hopefully we'll be in person soon. I can't wait to meet Tracy there in person at some point. And Rob, it'll be a pleasure meeting you at some point. So looking forward to that. This is the fun group, right? So we have a lot of fun here. We do all kinds of great stuff. You'll see that soon. So anyway, so I'll take a motion to hopefully everybody's read the minutes from last month's meeting from April. I'll seek a motion to approve those minutes.
I move we approve the minutes.
Jan makes the motion, second by Jim. All in favor or discussion? Everything look good? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Hold the phone.
Nothing
the
never
post.
comes good on the home phone, so that's not any good. Anyway, so we public comments. Did you have any people wanting to make a public comment, Joe or Travis?
Mr. Chair, the department did not receive anything in advance of tonight's meeting. Those in attendance via Zoom are representatives from SWT and then the consultant doing a presentation later in the meeting agenda. So I don't believe there are any public comments.
Okay, sounds good. My assistants are going to take care of the phone since it keeps ringing. Okay, so we've got 2 items ready for action. One is a consideration of a draft recommendation report that we asked the department to provide on the property owner's request to change the street name of Old Slave Road in Ward 1. Has everybody read the department's report?
Yes.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, there's just a couple things I'd like to note about the report.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, as the chair just noted at our April meeting, the commission members voted unanimously to proceed forward and prepare a recommendation regarding the property owner's request to change the name of Old Slave Road to Madison Lane. Madison Lane does have a historical significance because it was chosen due to the farmer slave, Elijah Madison, that was brought to the area by property owners and ultimately fought for the Union Army during the Civil War, returned to the area as a freedman, owned property, and is ultimately buried up on Wild Horse Creek Road. The commission understood the nature of the request and considered the components that are required for the commission's review, principally that all property owners that are addressed to Old Slave Road support the name change, which is a key component again. In the report that is in draft form for commission action tonight, the Department of Planning has also identified two other sources that were contacted regarding the name change. The first is the St. Louis County Office of Emergency Management, which oversees the dispatching of a number of emergency services ranging from police, fire to EMS. They identified Madison Lane as having many repetitions across the jurisdictional boundaries of St. Louis County and the municipalities. In fact, the number was over 600. They would prefer Elijah Madison Lane, given that there are no repetition associated with that particular choice. The department also contacted the fire marshal, Jim McKay, at Monarch Fire Protection District and asked that individual if there were any concerns from the fire district's perspective relative to either Madison Lane or Elijah Madison Lane. The fire marshal noted that as long as it's addressed out of the Office of Emergency Management for St. Louis County and addresses are assigned to the properties, they really had no preference. And it would, again, be up to the city of Wildwood. Acknowledging the concern from the Office of Emergency Management, the department's draft recommendation report to the commission does support either Elijah Madison Lane, which was the choice of the property owners in 2012 in a failed attempt to rename the street, or Madison Lane. The key characteristic I would like to note that is identified in the department's report is that it is a private street. There is a slave cemetery associated with the subdivision off the private street. And so to a certain degree, less identification may actually be better from a couple of standpoints. First, ensuring the safety of the slave cemetery, as well as not allowing or encouraging trespass onto a private street and private property. So again, the department is recommending Madison Lane or Elijah Madison Lane, but would note that there are a number of streets that have been named in Wildwood of recent times that were repeats, so to speak, of others in St. Louis County, but we've all seemed to survive despite that. With that, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, the department is recommending the name change and has given two choices for the consideration by the Administration and Public Works Committee of City Council, which will make the next recommendation and then formally submit that to City Council. After the chair either opens the floor for discussion or a motion is made, the department will be available for any comments or questions. Thank you.
Okay, with that, the great report, Joe. Should we do a motion in a second and then discuss this? Or do you want to discuss it first?
It's really up to the commission members. You can open the floor for discussion, then take a motion, or if there's a strong feeling about a name, do it now.
Okay, go ahead and Steve, go ahead and make any comments.
I mean, I like the old name, but I understand, and it is not a historical road. Looking back at the 1970 county aerials, there's no road there. So that's fairly recent naming of that road. So I don't see that there's any historical significance to that. So with that, I would say I would prefer Elijah Madison Lane, just to identify Elijah from the president, or there's a bunch of other people named, like 600 other people named Madison in St. Louis County. So I would be in favor of changing the name to Elijah Madison. I would like to suggest that the city put up sort of like their community markers, a plaque that sort of that tells the story, sort of what was in the report here. Don't have to say there's a cemetery at the end of the road or anything like that, but just say it's named after him and what his story is. And I think people would be interested in that. And they can say the road's, put a private sign up on the road, but that's my feeling.
That sounds like a work program item for next year.
Yes.
Jim?
We could carry on this discussion, but I would like to make a motion and second what Steve has said. I make a motion that we accept Joe's report, and I would like to make the preference of Elijah.
Okay, I was a council member the last time this thing came through, and I was one of the, nobody voted, nobody made a motion. And I was one of those that didn't do that, but it was after all kind of, it was very stressful. Heard both sides of the story, and that's why no action was taken. So I was a part of that on the when I was on the council the last time this came up. But I definitely I think this is appropriate in this case. So Jim, you made that motion. Does somebody want to second Jim's motion? Chris will make the second. Any discussion now? And the motion, just to be clear, is accept the department's report and then add a preference of the Historic Preservation Commission for Elijah Madison Lane. And then also recommend that we seek on the next work program to add a plaque.
We'll make sure that's on the agenda for the next meeting, the plaque component.
Okay. So all in favor of accepting this report?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Thank you all. We appreciate it.
Okay, the next item on our ready for action item on new business is a consultant scope of work and costs for the Route 66 Roadside Park project. And we have, I'm looking at the panel. So Bonnie, there you go. Hi, Bonnie. Good to see
Good
you.
evening.
And Scott Rundy. Good
Yep,
to see
he
you,
should
Scott.
be joining here.
There he is. It's all yours to get this going, Joe. So,
Well, thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, we have the two consultants from SWT Design here tonight to discuss the scope of work for the proposal for the Route 66 Roadside Park. As you know, at our last meeting, the commission members selected SWT Design for this purpose and authorized the Department of Planning to begin the process of negotiating a final proposal with cost. In talking with Ms. Roy, it seemed from her perspective, and I concurred wholeheartedly, that providing you all some input about how they would proceed forward and also get some questions answered would make the development of the final proposal and costs much more accurate and obviously reflective of the commission's input. So tonight, they are here to kind of walk you through the two tables that were provided by SWT Design. And with that, I'll close, and with the permission of the chair, turn it over to our consultant team.
fantastic. You have my permission.
Thank you all. And thank you first and foremost for selecting SWT Design for this exciting project. We are thrilled to help you through this process and really create a vision for the Route 66 Park, and can't wait to get started. So as Joe mentioned, we have pulled together an outline of the scope that we would propose, we feel is appropriate for a project of this type, but certainly want to have your input and have a dialogue with you before we throw a number at you. And we have a number of questions that go along with that. So I don't know, Scott, are you able to share screen? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, let me see if I can, like I have.
So I'm
You all
not
see that?
sure. Yes.
Okay, great.
I'm not sure how many of you had a chance to take a look at this. And Scott can kind of go through it in detail. We don't want to take up too much time of your agenda either. So if you've all read it and want to jump into questions, we can do that. If you'd like us to give an overview, we can do that as well. Anyone have a preference?
I'd appreciate your overview. How you see it. And then
Okay.
we'll have,
Scott, you want to run
I know
through
I'll
this?
have comments.
Yeah. So we have this kind of broken up into 3 overall phases, and this kind of ties directly to what we submitted with our qualifications. So the first phase being site investigation analysis. So this would be a lot of the data collection, the base map gathering. If we need a topo survey performed, we would do that in this phase. We'd also start collecting some of the historic data and mapping, and then also kind of start exploring initial programming thoughts and ideas that would kind of fold into the next phase that I'll talk about here in a second. We'll also start looking at MSD, probably doing an initial coordination review. Identified the underground detention structures, kind of determining with MSD, best approaches for working with that. And then also, looking at existing bicycle and pedestrian activity along Manchester Road, specifically at the project site we're looking at. And, a deliverable that we see coming out of that would be a memo that kind of summarizes what we found through that phase with our data collection and an analysis of the existing site conditions. The next phase, which probably some of this would be running concurrent with each other, would be the engagement phase. This would start kind of with our first big meeting with you all, which would be a visioning workshop. So once we've kind of started that data collection, we started thinking through some options for potential programming. We'll meet with you all to kind of have a charrette style workshop to discuss, preliminary thoughts on concepts for the area, program ideas for the site, what we'd like to see included in our initial concept development. Another component of this phase would be kind of collecting historical information from the community. We talked about the open call for historical information. I'm reaching out to you all. To kind of supplement the history in Wildwood, specifically as it relates to Route 66. And this would also be the kind of the key phase for the public outreach. So we'd start by working with you all to determine what's the most appropriate method for outreaching the community, and then also stakeholders. So we're anticipating stakeholder interviews with various community members and community groups to kind of get an understanding of what's appropriate for the site, what we'd like to see for the site. And then also look at an online community survey. So once we've had some of this information developed, we'll fold this into a community survey that we can broadcast more largely and to the larger community that could focus in on things such as design preferences for specific program elements, that sort of thing. And then once we kind of started into more solid development of the concepts, we'll use a couple of series of open houses to develop further feedback and further preference from the community. So the first open house would be to review initial concepts. So we'll probably have multiple concepts here for review to determine preference and direction to move forward. And then we'd follow that up with a second open house that would review one kind of preferred alternative concept and seek revisions kind of before finalizing the concept plan. And similar to the first phase, we would provide a public feedback or public outreach memo to kind of summarize what we heard throughout the process, what we heard throughout the community engagement. And then the third phase would be the concept development. So this again will be running concurrently with the engagement. So the first major task being initial concept development. So this would be where we kind of generate multiple options. We're thinking up to 3 options. This would include rough ideas of cost opinions. And then during this phase, we'd also start initiating some concept reviews with MSD to get their feedback on what we should expect being required with this site development. And then before we take this to the open house, we would vet this through with you all with a pinup review to kind of run through the options and make sure we're all comfortable with the options we're showing before we present them to the public and make any modifications necessary. And after the first public meeting, we'll take the feedback that we hear and we'll vet that out with you all. And then we would develop what our preferred alternative would be. So we'll develop concepts there. And then during this phase, I know during the interview, we discussed, other options for like renderings for donor coordination, donor graphics, that sort of thing. We would look to conduct that during this phase if that's desired as well. And then we also do another pinup review here and then follow that up with the kind of presentation to the open house and developing a finalized concept package that you all can take forward and move forward for funding and implementation. So before we move on to the questions, do you all have any questions for us on this specifically?
I got one question, and believe it or not, I'm just wondering why you were going to do Bike and Ped Council on Manchester Road.
If you'd like me to answer that, I
Okay.
actually added that, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I was thinking it'd be nice to kind of know what the traffic, so to speak, is in the vicinity of the property now. And then hopefully after it's constructed, be able to gauge it again and get an understanding if we've been successful or not.
Okay. But the question is, as far as, on the weekends, it's crazy on Old Manchester Road with bicyclists and walkers. During the week, a lot less probably, but that's fine. It's an added expense on the project.
And that's something we talked about internally. We could include that as a outlined additional service so that you could make that decision and include it or not. I think we looked at some preliminary Strava maps, which obviously are isolating to particular users, but we found it pretty telling. Like you said, Manchester is very highly used as a cycling route, whereas the trail directly along 100 is more pedestrian heavy. But there are other tools that we could be utilizing as well. We could include that as an additional service, and if that's something you would like included, we can certainly keep it in the scope.
Or Mr. Chair, conversely, we can pull it.
Well, why don't you add that as an optional service? That would be really good. I just did that recently. So Joe, do you know how, I know we've just recently finished that project on Old Manchester Road, the streetscape project. Is there some good survey data for the topo in that area, or did it not go out off the right of way into the site as much?
Mr. Chair, there is some accurate survey information from the streetscape project, and it's not inclusive of the entirety of the property. But when we purchased the property, we did do an Alta survey as part of the title work. So I think we have a good survey available. And as you can tell just from the riding by the site or seeing the site, topographically, there's not a lot of change across it.
Okay. So I think you know, that your process is pretty accurate. And, you know, the more we can streamline this, the better. We just don't want to, we want you to kind of move through this, and we want to move through there with you and then get something going. Joe, did you give them guidance on when we're going to have budget money to construct the project, the ultimate preferred alternative?
We're going to ask for budget money in 2022. Now, saying that, it may not be budgeted until 2023, but without the benefit of the final concept design, we'll never get off the ground, so to speak.
Okay. And what kind of timeline, Bonnie and Scott, do you have for the scope that you show here?
So we haven't necessarily put a schedule together. I think we really wanted to hear from the commission if we have right-sized the engagement process. And I think, Scott, if you want to jump to the next screen, just so we could start getting into some of the questions. As you know, that can really stretch out a process, and meeting over the summer can be challenging as well. So really trying to find the right opportunities to do that. I would say, you know, this certainly could be expedited, 3-4 months if it's super quick with you all and less engagement with the public. Or I would say 6 to 9 months if we went through a pretty traditional stakeholder participation, open house, wait for feedback, survey. There's a wide scale of timeline that we could cover. Are there particular milestones within the calendar year you are trying to hit?
So when would we have to have budget information, Joe, on a preferred alternative and a cost for the preferred alternative?
The initial presentation, which is what I would describe as preliminary, is around the end of September, beginning of October for capital improvements. Then the overall parks and planning budget is through the month of October. And then finally, the decisions regarding capital improvements go through November. And final passage of the budget is the second Tuesday in December. So it's about a 2.5-month process.
And otherwise, it'll wait till the next year, right, to program anything. Or you could do a mid-year adjustment, or not. Is that possible?
We have in the past, on a couple of occasions, not frequently, done mid-year budget adjustments for project to initiate or start projects. So it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Okay.
So with that timeline, I certainly think even if we went with what we've outlined here, and it's more of that 6-month time frame, we would know very closely anyway what that final plan and estimated construction costs are in October, even if we're certainly by November as we're refining that idea. I think we could work that into your city's budgeting process pretty well.
So Joe, any comments on the level of engagement on this? There's been a lot of engagement over the last couple of years in this area, and with there's been a lot of engagement with the adjacent property owners on the streetscape project. Does this look appropriate to you, or is it a little heavy? It's definitely not light.
Well, at the very least, the department would recommend to the commission members that we engage the adjoining residential community, Grover Crossing. And then from that perspective, also some of the businesses in the immediate vicinity. For example, Three French Hens, when they have their large sale events or their special events, they often need additional parking. And part of the rationale is that the Route 66 roadside park could also provide that additional overflow parking for special events along Route 66, or in this case, Manchester Road. So I would probably say we could get by with a little less, but again, I want the commission to be making most of these decisions if possible, because I want you to be satisfied with the product that SWT Design provides.
Well, and I was just thinking that, you know, if we're not the decision-making body, the council is ultimately, and we're going to provide a recommendation to the council, right? But, and that's a good question, Bonnie and Scott, is who's the core decision-making team? So sounds like from Joe's standpoint, we're going to be working with you on this, but we're not the ultimate decision makers. The council members are. But I think, you know, we can use our forum since we meet monthly. If we can kind of tag if we want to do some stakeholder engagement and have that call to come to our meetings and listen to the discussion, participate in the discussion. I mean, that could streamline the effort a little bit so that we're not going back and forth too much, and we can keep making progress on it. And in our commission, you know, we can hear what people say and kind of work through this. My old goal is to streamline it and be as efficient as we can with this and come out with a good result that everybody's happy with. My phone never rings, and now it's ringing like crazy.
I'm sensing that the two public open houses maybe feel like that's perhaps in excess, and you know, not knowing all the other ways in which you're engaging the community for feedback right now. We understand that engagement fatigue that can occur. Yeah, I think we're pretty excited about the idea of having sort of an open call for Route 66 storytelling from the community that could also inform the larger Wildwood residential community, business community, that this project is happening and that we want your ideas. And then similarly, as we come up with kind of the final plan, working with you and more closely knit stakeholders, the neighborhood as well as business owners, could then sort of reveal that concept development at the end of the project. And that could be done online through the city's website. That could be done with a meeting or inviting them to this meeting. That could be done in a number of different ways, but I think that could be simplified if there's concern there with public open houses.
Well, if I may, I think public meetings with these people or with everybody are important, and I think they're going to take a long time. The ones I've been to, got a lot of people who want to talk a lot, and you have to listen to them. You don't have to listen. You want to listen to them. Let me say that. So, I mean, I think we've got to have a separate meeting besides our monthly meetings. And with that, would that maybe suggest that we have a separate steering committee do this? I don't know. I'd just like to I think we should consider that.
Paul,
Ed? Go ahead, Dan.
you know, I think everybody's thinking the same thing. If we're not careful, we're going to be playing a big game of telephone. We're going to come up with an idea. We're going to run it by the neighborhood. They're going to run it by the council, and we're just going to be playing back and forth, back and forth. Have we thought about possibly adding a neighborhood representative? Maybe one, maybe two at the most, and a business representative to our team. And then that aspect is addressed through them. And we're not going back and forth 100 different times.
That is one of the thoughts we had with steering committee as opposed to just the Historic Preservation Commission, that if you added a few of those key stakeholder members and call the steering committee, that would help certainly with that communication throughout the process. it doesn't necessarily answer the question of engaging the larger Wildwood community.
Right. And it's my discretion to form a committee like that, a steering committee for this project, correct, Joe? That's in my bounds as the chair.
Yes, sir.
But now I don't want to have to, so will I have to go to council members to get, solicit recommendations for representatives and stuff like that? There's another layer. So I know how engagement goes and I know how expensive it gets. And expensive could be half the cost of this project if we let it get away from us.
Mr. Chair, I'd have to check the bylaws to see what authority or what process you'd have to follow if you establish a special committee. I actually don't remember in the bylaws you having to get council approval, but I want to check that for you.
Okay, we got Rob, and Rob's in Ward 6 and Tracy's in Ward 3. Do you two have any opinions on, this is in Ward 8, right? This is my ward. As far as the other wards and the rest of the city, what are your thoughts from a council perspective?
I feel like, I'm based on the Village Green feedback that we got when that was, up at the town center, and that's all wards, I feel like participated in that because it's such a focal point. On this, my personal opinion would be you're not going to hear a lot of feedback from citizens outside of that ward. You'll hear some, I guess, maybe from bikers or people that frequent that. I don't know, like we say, people get overwhelmed with feedback sometimes, and people's lives are busy, and if it's not a big deal to them, they're not going to participate and comment. So I feel like, and I don't know if Rob feels the same, but that it's mostly you're going to hear from people that live right there in that area, and you're not going to get a lot of feedback from the other wards. Maybe
Yeah,
that's just my gut opinion.
No, I totally concur. See, obviously I have limited experience with this at this point, but I would believe a project like this the majority of the feedback you would get would be the ward most impacted, as opposed to the Village Green, which is everyone, right? I see that as impactful for the entire city. This one, while it's impactful, it's going to have the majority of the impact on the most, the residents closest to it. So I just don't see there being nearly the same amount of feedback.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for your opinions. I was thinking that, but I wanted you to say it as council members. So, but Joe, as long as we could streamline the steering committee and selection of additional people that would participate, I just want to add another meeting to people's schedule or to your schedule on this. It'd be nice to keep it kind of as a either in advance of one of our meetings or something like that, just to streamline things a little bit. But I don't have problems with a separate steering committee. But would we have all the Historic Preservation Commission members part of that steering committee, or will there be a subgroup of that with additional public involved or stakeholders involved?
Paul, I believe Jim has a comment he's been wanting to make.
I'm not seeing on my screen. That's why.
He's been waving his hand.
I don't see him anywhere on my screen, so can't see him.
Okay, well, I'm here. I don't know if it'd be appropriate or not, but I agree with Rob and Tracy. I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of feedback unless it's in their backyard. Would it be appropriate to go ahead and start this with our group, and then at some time when we can kind of see this thing taking shape, how we send out mailings for public hearings and that, use the same criteria of the area around the impacted area and send out a letter explaining what's going on, you know, what our plans are and everything, and just kind of an informational, hey, just kind of letting you know what's going on. And then I think if that excites somebody to make a comeback or a comment or get back to City Hall or something, and you could even put in there that the HPC is discussing this at their meetings, and you know, if you want to join or watch, fine, but I don't think we need a formal group, because I think if people know what's going on, they'll either say, oh, that's great, or I don't care. But maybe you'll get the people say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on in my, you know, in my area? So that's, I think, how we ferret out the public sentiment.
And I'd recommend too that we just make these meetings part of our monthly meeting, and we don't end up with 3 different meetings for three meetings a month. We got a 2-hour time slot, we dedicate an hour for the project, and we move on.
Okay. So are we saying that we're gonna use us as the main steering committee, and we'll add somebody if somebody's really excited about it and really wants to participate? We'll leave it open for that, but we're pretty much the steering committee for guiding the consultant.
Correct.
Okay.
Maybe at some point we contact the HOA president for that subdivision. Maybe he's a representative for the entire group. We get somebody that's got his arms around most people and got its finger on the pulse, or her, whoever that may be.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I may, I think we could begin in terms of the scope and process, the site investigation and analysis, and not necessarily have input from the nearby subdivision, the surrounding business community. That's more on SWT design to basically get the research and the topographic information, whatever it may be. And I think as they formulate that and present that report, we may be able to tell better how we want to maybe address the addition of the stakeholders when we get to that point. But again, I think it's critical that we do get feedback. And I kind of concur with Ms. Nyan, the council person, in that we had great success in the Village Green doing things over the internet. And we got great feedback, almost 1,000 responses over the 3 public input sessions. So I think we could use that to our advantage as well.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Agree.
So any other comments on the scope, since I opened that can of worms there? Anything else?
I agree with Joe.
So make it more virtual engaging of people, and then allow engage, and we can help with the engagement too. That would help, you know, keep that part down. If we have the, I'm just trying to think of ways that we can streamline things too. So if we have the Wildwood event in the fall, and we have a tent like we normally do, that could be another resource to get out and screen a preferred option or the alternatives by the general public, because we get a lot of people coming through our tent. At least the last time we had one. I think people are going to be crazed to get out and out there and talk to people, and that'll be a really good event to engage people.
Yeah, I think piggybacking on events where people are already going to be present is a great way to do engagement. I also think that we could, I mean, this conversation is very helpful to us to be able to then refine our outline based on your feedback. I think we can certainly look at a simplified engagement process that utilizes your commission as our primary board of decision makers. And if you invite additional members, that's great. I think we could also just make sure we earmark some time for stakeholder discussions, whether that's just meeting with the HOA president or their board and or some business owners to get a little bit more insight and build that momentum for the project. At the same time, that would be my recommendation. And whether then we have a virtual platform or larger engagement, we certainly could look at that. But I think we can present something to you. And again, if you've got feelings that it's still too much engagement, we can continue to scale that back.
Can you add some optional tasks within that we have the base at the very minimum what we can do, and then a few optional tasks if we want to enhance it, or if we can add to it if needed? Because I know how engagement goes. It could go really swiftly and easily, or it could be really difficult, and you just don't know what you're going to get and what kind of tune you're going to strike with people. So we can leave that at there. I just want to make sure that you get to we get to data collection, get the input you need to start developing alternatives, make sure that we're hearing everybody adequately and getting people have their input, and they have a venue of engagement. But then I want to get to a preferred alternative so we can kind of keep this thing moving, because the only good project is an implemented project.
Yes, we agree. And we really get excited about navigating the public engagement process. So we're happy to right size that and be adaptable.
Okay.
I think one other question under engagement is, again, focused on implementation. Who are the other folks that you would like SWT Design involved in presenting your recommendations? Or would you just like us to put a final package together that then someone from the commission then goes and presents to City Council, for example?
Or the Planning and Parks Committee, Joe? Will this have to go to the Planning and Parks Committee to get a recommendation to go to the City Council? And will the P&Z be involved?
All three, sir.
Okay, there you go, Bonnie. Put a lot of meetings in there.
So you would like us to present, we had included the Planning and Parks Committee as a group we would engage. Am I hearing correctly that you would like us to be available to present to Planning and Zoning as well as City Council?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So Scott, stop me if we're skipping something, but I think if we move to concept development, we haven't really talked about construction budget, and obviously this process is to help identify what that construction budget would be. But we thought we'd ask now if there's any sense of scale or appetite for what kind of investment the city would want to make in this property.
Go ahead, Joe. It's good to give them, we need to give them a ballpark, I'd say, on what's reasonable.
Well, Mr. Chair, recognizing that the property is a half acre in size and a portion of it has underground detention storage, the department had thought at first somewhere in the range of $250,000. I don't know if that's realistic or not. But like I say, it is a time coming out of COVID-19, so I don't want to necessarily scuttle the project by giving an estimate that's too high and none that a price or an amount no one would support.
So was it Centennial Park or Anniversary Park on Clayton Road? What was the price tag on that finished product park? It had
again, that was completed in 2006, and my recollection was it was of a similar amount. But again, that consisted of almost 3 times the size of this particular site. So that was about 1.5 acres of development area.
Okay. Well,
That's helpful.
yeah, and the big thing is we don't want them to go totally crazy, and we get a finished product that you can't build, or nobody's got the stomach to, prove a budget for a construction budget for. So we just definitely don't want to. We don't want to steer them down the wrong road. So.
Well, and we'll be vetting a lot of ideas before we even get to budgets, to understand the appetite for the type of program you want to have there. How many people do you want to be able to host? Who are your target visitors? All of those things will weigh into the concept development. As Scott had mentioned, the kind of quality of graphics that we create, and whether you think that there would be donor solicitation or even just other potential funding sources, what level of perspectives or graphic illustrations do you want us to include in our scope?
Jim, do you have a comment relative to that, or Dan? You both had your fingers up there.
I had a question on the number you threw out, Joe. Is that an all-in number, or is that inclusive of scope and consultant fees, or is that in addition to?
The scope and consultant fees are already budgeted for this year. So that would just be a standalone number, that $250,000.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes, sir.
I just had a question about the park, Green Pines Park. Is that the one that's at the end of the Grover Loop?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How much acreage did that include?
That ended up being about 15,000 square feet. So about 1/3 of an acre.
And if I remember correctly, that was a large amount of money spent there.
Yes, sir. If I am reincarnated, I'm going to come back and sell playground equipment.
Yeah. Okay. So that was it seems to me it's like almost $5 million.
No, it was $800,000, but almost 2/3 of that was the playground equipment for the 2 nodes.
Okay.
Wow, that's impressive.
Okay, that's just a question I had to kind of get my mind grounded.
So do you answer your question, Bonnie, on renderings and photo sims? I think we got to give people a picture of what it's going to be, but I would wait till we get that preferred alternative.
Okay.
And I know I personally, I like the photo. I mean, we work together on doing photo sims, and at least we are coming up. So, so I know what a good quality job that is, and how that is to sell internally, as well as if there's additional funding sources or revenue sources we can get to supplement the city budget. I know the city likes leveraging their money, so they're really good at that. So I think those photo sims and renderings definitely help achieve that.
Okay. Good.
But not too many. I know how much they cost to develop.
I think the other question there after that one is really about the study area. In our proposal, and in our interview, we had talked about this parcel really having potential to be a catalyst for additional investment along the Route 66 corridor, and just wondering what the commission's thoughts were on the physical footprint of our study area. If we should be, not blinders on necessarily, but really just focused on improving the park, or looking at how the park experience might also influence what happens along the streetscape corridor, and whether that's interpretive signage or, you know, things that could just continue to draw out that overall Route 66 experience.
I think this will be a catalyst in and of itself. So I think it's going to draw, I think it's going to draw things, and it's going to be a really nice pocket park or roadside park, I'm kind of calling it. But, you know, depends on the property owners along the corridor. And if they want to start developing, there's plenty of good prime parcels too. And there's been parcels that have been talked about as far as redevelopment, Joe. I know it, you know, right across the street, basically next to Larry's there. I mean, that's been on the table for a while, and it kind of never happened. Hopefully this would spur it, but I don't know that, you know, if we do it a good job, hopefully people want to invest in the corridor, and that they should be, because of the historic nature of the corridor and the way it looks now. That streetscape really looks great. So this should only enhance that economic possibilities in the corridor for redevelopment.
Mr. Chair, if I may, please, Mr. Scott, go ahead.
Okay, no, I think that just this part in itself along the improved Manchester Road will be it's a little jewel that will attract attention. And I don't think we really need to look further than what we're doing right there. I think it's going to attract bicyclists from out of Wildwood, other people who see Old Manchester drive by it from out of Wildwood will stop there. And by doing that, I think it will attract other businesses around there for improvement or development.
Go ahead, Joe.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and my apologies again, Mr. Scott. In this particular instance, I kind of pushed SWT Design to include this question. And the reason I did that is over the years, we've talked about doing some type of banners or street decals, things along those lines on portions of Route 66 to enhance its identification, more so than just a few blue byway signs that we have in place now. And so the thought is this might be an opportune time to take a look at that, then kind of coordinate with the Department of Public Works, since it's a right-of-way, and hopefully come up with, let's say, a modest plan, but one that we could take advantage of the street lights like many communities do, not only for Route 66 promotion, but for Veterans Day, 4th of July, days along those holidays, so to speak, so as that we can maybe look at what's the hardware we need, what would be an appropriate spacing, those things like that. So I was an advocate of this, but certainly I understand the commission's perspective, but I don't want you to blame SWT Design for it being on the list.
No, it's a great idea, but I think it's another work program task. But keeping it in mind that could, but let's focus on this roadside park.
Very good. So the last question I have, we had included an architecture firm named SFS on our team, with the anticipation of possibly having architectural structures in this park. And this is something that I vetted with Joe a little bit. You know, I think we see in this conceptual phase that SWT Design has the capacity and creativity to come up with specifying if there is to be some kind of shade or structure, what might that be, how big might it need to be, whereabout should it go. Where we would include an architectural consultant would be to take that a little bit further, to to get maybe more specific about representing some kind of historic element or some kind of, architectural expression. And so we wanted to ask the commission if you see value at this point in this process of engaging that architectural consultant as a sub-consultant on our team. And if so, how extensive of a role would you like them to play?
Any comments on that, anybody? Dan's got one. Dan's got a comment.
I think we were all pretty impressed with your firm's presentation and the depth of analysis you've done so far. It would be my understanding or thinking that you bring that with you already. And we're not talking about a 20-story building. We might be talking about some shade or some awnings or some whatever. That would be something that you guys are more than capable of handling, I would think. True?
Yes, that's
Absolutely.
true.
Steve?
Yeah, well, I think it would be a very minor structure, but I do think that you would need an architect to actually put it together and design it and do the foundations and take care of that. So I don't know if beyond that, I think I would look to SWT's design of it, but to support you as you feel necessary in actually designing the structure, I think an architect may be required. Architect, structural engineer.
And Mr. Scott, I agree with that. This scope of services is going through only concept development. I absolutely concur that if we were to move forward into design documentation for construction, that an architect would or a structural engineer would be involved. I just want to make sure that that's clear, that we aren't creating documents to construct the park with this scope here, just to come up with the great vision for what it can be.
So let's leave them out for now.
Okay.
Let's engage them in
the next phase.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree for now that I think SWT's design will be everything we need.
Okay. Very good. I think we've covered the target milestone questions. We had noted in there, Scott had done the math of the Route 66 Centennial coming up here in the next couple of years. Certainly what a celebration that would be at this park, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, Scott, that we haven't yet had answered?
I think the only one that we kind of glossed over was, if there's been any additional kind of thoughts about desirable or non-desirable program elements, specific site features that you all are thinking absolutely must be included as part of that, as part of this project.
No neon.
No neon.
Yeah. That's an inside joke with this commission. So.
I feel that emphasis should be on the rural nature of this street or road at that time and what was there then. No neon, no drive-ins,
No back ends of cars sticking out of the ground.
Yeah,
like,
so I think we need to get away from what you think of Route 66.
Yeah, none of that. Bonnie,
So
look on the back of Chris's screen. None of that stuff. Although that's
Okay.
pretty cool, but it's not Wildwood. Jim?
Yeah, I think if this park is gonna be utilized by bikers, walkers, and things like that. I think as we went through the Green Pines Park, shade was a big thing, and so I think we need to have, because majority of these people are probably going to use it during daytime hours. Yeah, so any structure should be the shade structure, and you can use your imagination to how you provide that. But I think knowing what all the comments and everything with Green Pines, shade was a big deal.
Hey, Jill, what are your thoughts on restroom facilities?
They're expensive, but people want them in their park properties.
Especially if you heat them, right? Heating them, it gets real expensive, right, Joe?
Yes, it does. Most of our facilities aren't heated.
Okay.
I guess my question is, are we at a point until we see a number that's crazy to want to consider restroom facilities?
Mr. Routen, I would say we should start looking at that as part of the initial startup of the process. But I think we'll find fairly quickly that it's expensive. And it's also, restroom facilities are hard to kind of blend into, let's say, a small park area without almost making it the focal point.
Sure. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's a lot of headaches come with it. So yes,
This is a
no,
small
maybe.
park too, so.
Yes, no, maybe at this point, or maybe not at this point.
Well, my thought would be,
Bicyclists drink a lot of water.
Joe,
again, I didn't hear Mr. Scott's comment. I apologize. I
Oh,
talked over him.
bicyclists drink a lot of water, so I think restrooms would be pretty necessary.
Although a true bicycle is going to have plenty of water or they won't be going out.
It is always nice to have a source of water when you're on a hot ride.
I wasn't talking about a source of water in terms of restroom.
I know. Disposal. Yep.
Well, and again, I would just suggest that as part of our kind of initial thoughts on the design, to include it and see how far we can go with it.
And if it fits into the design of the alternative, and if it doesn't fit, don't wedge something in that doesn't belong.
or can't afford.
Well, those are definitely things that we can explore with you all. And we will also go through a list of things that this park doesn't want to be. I know you've said no neon and no half buried cars. Is there any other type of program that is a definite no? It's okay if you don't know yet.
I would like to just on some positives or things that I would like to see. I would like to see some, I think it'd be cool if you had some form of Route 66 emblazoned bike rack or something that highlights the logo, the numbers, et cetera. And I hope to see, and maybe it's not the bike rack, but I think to me, that's what I'm looking for in this park.
So I know we got a lot of historic community markers. I think we've talked about that before, about Route 6, something on that order. That this would be a good thing to have in the park, a historic marker of some kind.
I would like to see a topographical model of Route 66 going through Wildwood and the historical objects and buildings and markers and things along that route that people could look at and hopefully go and find and look at.
It's a fun idea.
Get out of concrete or something, but
Thinking about in rural Route 66, there were rest stops, family gathering places. So kind of a rural family gathering place, maybe a path with a storyline, whether it's a number of podiums with pictures and graphics and in verbiage, either it being the entire Route 66, kind of walk through the entire Route 66, or walk through just the Route 66 as it pertains to Wildwood.
Fun too.
I have one more suggestion, if I may. There were along 66 or in Wildwood quite a few groves, Stovall's being the last one. And I just wonder in an image if it's possible to, from old photographs, is to somehow catch that feeling rather than just a park with a lot of curvy walks, but to have the image of what the old groves were like along 66 and in Wildwood.
You've got our juices flowing for sure. My mind is going all kinds of directions. I certainly want to be sensitive that you have more items on your agenda. This has been tremendously informative. I want to thank you again for not only selecting SWT, but inviting us to the meeting tonight to get further clarification. Our next steps will be to put together a formal proposal with the outlined scope and associated design fees, as well as some design alternatives that could be added if you so choose. Again, we want to continue a dialogue if you feel that something is not included or doesn't need to be included. So please do not hesitate to let us know that. To whom should we be sending the scope and proposal?
They sent it to Joe.
To Joe, okay.
I'm correct, Joe, right? Send it to you? Okay.
Yes, sir. We'll make sure everybody gets it then, and we'll be glad to be that kind of collection point.
Okay, well,
Okay.
thanks, Bonnie. Thanks, Scott, for your time tonight.
Thank
you
you.
all.
We'll see you soon.
All right, see you all.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Okay. So the next thing, we've got 4 items ready for action in old business. One is if I'm not mistaken, a consultant presentation of the 2020 to 2021 new surveys of historic properties.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Newberry is bringing in Katie right now, our consultant. Katie and I did have a discussion before tonight's meeting, and what I've asked her to do is just to kind of give a brief overview of the surveys that she completed for the city of Wildwood, and then just accept questions or comments relative to them from the commission members. And I do want to thank Katie for her patience as we work through the few items in front of her on tonight's agenda. And we're glad to have her here, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Katie. The floor is yours.
Hi guys, I'm Katie with Landmark Association. Do you mind if I share my screen? Okay. Okay, so these were the properties that were surveyed. There were 25 and the date range was 1944 to 1947. There were some limitations in the survey work, obviously due to COVID and due to kind of the recent formation of Wildwood. So some of the historical aspects were a little more limited, especially with finding permits for buildings. So I basically had to do guesstimations based on the historical structures and architectural styles, as well as based on survey maps that identified if buildings were there in those locations. For anyone who's doing future survey work, having a map like this also helps. So when you do the survey, kind of mapping out your route. The following are just going to be some images of buildings that I wanted to talk about. So hopefully you can see them all. So these are two kind of examples of buildings that haven't been modified as much throughout the survey. There were a smaller amount of buildings. The majority have been modified or heavily modified, but you're also in a very like heavily progressive area with new construction happening all the time. So a lot of homeowners are wanting to try to keep up. So they either update their exteriors or tear down a building. This is a structure that has been heavily modified. There's no way to really ascertain the original building, but as you can see on the left, the porch was added on, and on the right there was a lot of other additions. On the front, everything has been changed about it. And then we also have buildings like this that kind of appear vacant. There were several that were kind of hard to tell whether or not someone lived there or not, and also trying to find the building address for the building was a little difficult unless they had a mailbox out in front. This is another building that's kind of just been altered over time, but also stuck in the time period as well. And then there were also some issues with trying to survey certain properties. Not really big issues. I only had 3 properties that I couldn't really survey. 2 I couldn't survey, and 1 I kind of surveyed from afar. So the one on the left, Pond Road, was behind a fence, so I couldn't really get onto the property. The one that I have no photo of, it was down a street that had heavily marked signage saying private road and security cameras, so I didn't want to venture down that way without having the owner properly contacted. And then the one on the bottom, Rogers Road, that was the only property that I did have difficulties with a homeowner who was not happy that I was present on the area. The only was he wasn't really the homeowner of that house. He was the house to the left. He was the neighbor. So he didn't want me taking photos of it or being there. So I tried to take a photo as quickly as I could to still do a survey form for that property. All of the properties that had issues, the owners were contacted, and either they didn't reply or they said that they didn't want to be involved. So we just did what we could with what we had. And then, so the primary property that I found that had a potential for a listing, and it would primarily be a local listing, was Allenton Road. It was actually one of the oldest buildings in the survey, predating the 40s for sure, and discovered via realtor photos that it had log cabin aspect inside of it. And one of the more prominent families, I think, lived in it, but more research would be needed, I believe, if you wanted to continue. But throughout the process, it was relatively easygoing. Like I said, there were only 25 properties, and not many of them were viable for a national register listing. And I didn't put many for a local listing, primarily because you already had examples of those buildings, and didn't see that the one surveyed would be needed to add to that. A lot of these are just post-war suburbs, and as I mentioned, many have been altered over time, and I couldn't define any other major historical aspects, either historic significance or a person of importance associated with the properties. So, and I know, Joe, you had asked for any recommendations regarding this moving forward. I know that you're saying as you guys come closer to the 75-year-old threshold, getting closer to a modern era and worrying about like, is survey important? I believe that it is, because even though the buildings we might not find important now, it provides a snapshot of what they look like, and that in the future, when we are more removed, you'll at least have that historical aspect to know what it was, what it looked like, or what was there. Maybe it's changed, or maybe it hasn't. So I think that is still key. But yeah, do you guys have any questions for me?
No, thanks for that presentation and taking your life in your hands, trying to get at some of those things. So I'm sure some property owners are cordial and some are, what are you doing here? Get out of here.
Yeah, I actually had one woman that was really, really nice. It was in one of the houses that I showed that was not altered as much. She and her husband had came out to help. But most of the others I go during the day where I'm not trying to bug anyone. So yeah.
Any questions for Katie, anybody?
Yeah.
Dee?
No, I feel that and looking at your report where the integrity, where unless it's good integrity, that you can see what the original house was, and that it, even if it's been added to, but with some sensitivity, like the Allenton Road house. So I don't see that some of these with poor integrity really have any value as a record of what they once were, and I would leave them off.
Yes and no. I mean, I think once you get towards the future, when you I think get towards like box buildings that they're all the same, maybe like apartment style or McMansion, that becomes a little harder of discerning importance. But with a lot of these, I agree, some of the integrity is very poor, but it's still, I mean, even if it's just a photo or a snapshot, you at least know what was in your area versus nothing, no record at all.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, well, thanks, Katie. We appreciate your work on this.
Thanks for having me.
Excuse me. I have one. I thought I saw it in the report there about consideration of how old these houses should be before they go on our list. That right now we're 70 years, which I feel is not long enough. While so many other places have century homes at 100 years. Is that something that is up for discussion or consideration?
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Sure.
that's a conversation Katie and I had, because as you can see from the 25 properties that were surveyed, many of them aren't as significant as we've seen in the past with other surveys as part of the inventory. But I think Katie's feeling, and I hadn't thought of this, that regardless of the character or integrity, we're creating a snapshot that someone else maybe 25 years from now or 30 years from now can use as a reference point. And that will assist them in understanding what was happening at that time period in Wildwood. So I think we can discuss that as a commission at a future meeting and maybe do a little research, like you say, and see what other communities use as that kind of demarcation in terms of age. But I think Katie made a good point. It doesn't hurt to have that, let's say, that reference point, because it may not mean much to us in 2021, but it may mean a lot to somebody in 2050.
Well, I do think that's a good point. I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of bungalows that were built in Wildwood in the 40s up to the 50s when they started building ranch houses or ranch style houses. But bungalows, little square bungalows, they're going to go away. People don't want to live in a 1-bathroom, 2-bedroom house anymore. They're going to disappear. And I do think it's good that we recognize those and document those.
I think it's a good conversation for us to have. And maybe as part of the inventory, the discussion could center on how we represent all the properties. Right now, we just do it, I believe, by the street name alphabetically, but maybe there's a section that we do it by age. So when people review the document, they know immediately, oh, these are the oldest in Wildwood and these are the youngest, so to speak, or something like that. But I think that's a good subject for us to kind of maybe do a little time, spend a little time on in the future.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Katie, for your work.
Thanks, guys.
And Katie, I'll be back in touch with you and kind of how to wrap up everything, and then we'll go from there. So thank you again.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you
Joe.
very much.
Do you need an action on anything here, Joe?
No, sir. We'll talk about the next steps at our next meeting.
Okay. So our next agenda item is a Missouri Bicentennial time capsule.
And Mr. Newberry is presenting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, at the January meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission, the department brought to your attention an opportunity to participate in a bicentennial time capsule. And as part of that discussion, the commission members did raise a question regarding one of the criteria for a submittal to the time capsule regarding the limit on the thickness of the item. And the question was, is it a 1/4 inch for all 3 categories, past, future, and present, or is it a 1/4 inch for each of the 3, totaling in 3/4 inches total? Based on the department's research on the website listing the criteria, we think that we're pretty certain that it's limited to a 1/4 inch for the overall submittal. So with that, the department's memo tonight begins to present to the commission ideas for inclusion for the 3 categories, again being the past, the present, and a note to future Missourians. So with that, the department is seeking the Historic Preservation Commission's input on each of those categories. And if the commission remains supportive of submitting a inclusion into the time capsule, what we might include for those 3 different categories.
Okay, so as far as in the past, we've got what, collage and or collection of historic photos, the original Wildwood logo, incorporate Wildwood sign and other materials. And where's all that information from all our, is it still at City Hall? The boxes of, okay. Or some other ideas. So any discussion on the past items that were proposed by the department? I think the original Wildwood logo is really good. I actually got a coffee mug that's got that on there. So I don't know where the heck I got that coffee mug, but I got it. That would be interesting to see how things progress to the current logo, which is in the present one. I think a collage of photos would be fantastic in addition to the Wildwood logo.
I think the the other materials related to the incorporation of the city will take some serious editing, because I'm sure the files that are in the city are a little more than 1/4 of an inch thick. So I'm not sure that will take some ingenuity to summarize everything in that. And that's not 1/4 of an inch, that's 1/3 of 1/4 of an inch.
Well, and there's a lot to sift through, and then I'm sure there would be a heavy discussion on, okay, what are the most critical items to show for the incorporation?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
an alternative would be is each of the commission members, including the liaisons, bring 2 things they think represent the past and present of Wildwood, since the future is a letter collectively written by the commission and signed by it. Then we could all do show and tell. Here's what I think. What do you think?
And we're all going to be in person next month. Perfect for show and tell.
Okay, that sounds like an idea. All in favor? Aye.
Can I amend that and request Travis to kindly remind us about 2 weeks before the meeting to come up with ideas?
It will be interesting to see how many are repeated by different people.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair, that was just a suggestion, but I actually think it'd be kind of neat to see what you all think.
It'll be fun. It will be
Yeah.
fun. As long as you come up with something. And if you don't come up with a couple ideas, then it's going to be very embarrassing.
You're buying the beer if you don't come up with some ideas.
There we go. Okay, that sounds like good. And that's for the past, right? Or past and
Past
present.
and present, right?
Yes.
Past and present. And maybe along the same lines, there's, rather than bringing materials for the future, maybe it's a sentence or 2 from each of us. And I'm sure there'll be some overlap, and maybe they get combined, or maybe not. Maybe we as a commission or all have our sentence or 2 and attribute of who provided it, and then we can combine those all into a document.
Commissioner Hammond, I think that's an excellent suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, so for the future, we're going to have a sentence or paragraph, correct? And then the present, and then the past examples for show and tell and consideration at our next meeting.
And keep in mind that everything we all produce has to be less than 1/4 of an inch thick. And what are the other dimensions again? Is it 8.5 by 11?
It's, Mr. Hammond, it's 8.5 by 14, so legal size.
Okay, sounds good. So that looks like an assignment for everybody. So homework. But thanks for getting the juices flowing, Travis.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I could, I'm wishing I would have included this in the report, but I can provide, or the department can provide, a link to a website that has example submissions from other folks who have already submitted to it. It took me a little while to find it, so I'd like to provide you with a direct link to those examples.
Well, thank you.
That'd be good. That'd be good to see.
Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. And don't send that out earlier than 2 weeks before our next meeting. These jump up on you really quick.
Maybe 2 reminders.
Okay.
I think
Reminder
Mr. Newberry will send it out on Tuesday for you.
Okay.
That's easy for you to say, Joe.
That's true, sir, but every once in a while, I like to put that hat on of director and at least ask somebody to do something, you know.
You'll have it by Tuesday.
All righty. Okay, so our next item is an update on the work program, 2021 work program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, just a couple of items I want to highlight tonight because many of our work program items were subjects of tonight's agenda. First, we did receive a second bid for Old Pond School, the painting of some of the exterior elements of the building. We are working on a third bid, so we'll have 3 total bids to present to the Historic Preservation Commission. As you know, with the trades very busy these days, getting people out to even provide estimates takes a little longer than we expected. So please accept the apologies of the department. In terms of the historic marker, again, here we're struggling to find that second and third bid. Mr. Gailey is working on the first bid, and it's a little different than the historic markers. As you recall, we did not install any type of parking pad, which has dictated a little bit more time and effort in this particular item, but it is a priority and we are working on it. And I, with a little hope, with a little luck and my fingers crossed, we'll have something back to you in June or no later than July. I'll go into the history book and the points of interest map as the last item on tonight's agenda, so I'll skip those. And then moving on to a couple of last items. I think it's important to note with the support of City Council, the Memorial Tribute Program was given authorization to proceed forward. There were some caveats associated with the City Council's action that they would like the Historic Preservation Commission to incorporate into its process. And so at our next meeting in June, I'll have the final program in the form that the Historic Preservation Commission recommended, but I'll also have that information from City Council. And then we can start talking about creating that process that will allow us to respond to nominations that are provided at some point in the future. So good news, the Memorial Tribute Program was successfully presented and the City Council concurred with moving forward with it.
It wasn't an overwhelming vote though.
No, sir, there was a lot of discussion, good discussion. Ms. Nyan or Mr. Jaxie may want to comment on that conversation at City Council, but I'll always look at the positive. We've got a program that we can at least implement and see if it works, and if it doesn't, certainly address.
Tracy?
Because we talked about this in Parks and Planning too, I'm on that committee as well. I think part of, probably, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, Joe, I think the biggest concern was that we would be favoring individuals that have put time in on this committee while maybe not giving equal time to other citizens or volunteers that had done equal amounts of work on other committees. And I think that probably was the biggest concern that the council in general had.
So Tracy, you're going to have to help me on this one because I had a work conflict this week, but in my conversation with Rob Rambo afterwards too, he did relate that the one other, I'm trying to remember, there was one other concern, just that it not be made on a certain time standard, like a new person would have to be nominated every 6 months or annually or anything like that, but this be done more on an ad hoc when somebody was truly deserving. So there wasn't pressure there wasn't the feeling of pressure to always be nominating a person.
Yes, that's exactly, and we discussed that at both meetings. You know, to make sure there was deserving individuals, not just like, okay, we got to get somebody for this year, and
Right.
you know, artificially to have someone. So yeah, if it was just when an individual qualifies and is deserving, then that would be the appropriate time, and not just having to do a certain number in a certain time frame.
Right, and the flip side of that is you might have 2 or 3 in a year,
Right.
or whatever time period, because there are truly some deserving people all at once, and you wouldn't have to wait, but you also wouldn't feel the pressure to nominate someone. That's just the feedback that I had heard.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Jim?
Joe, correct me if I think I remember there was always some discussion about the monetary award, that they felt like there were some people that had heartburn with that.
Well, Commissioner Rubis, at the last city council meeting, we didn't spend much time talking about the cost of the program. If you are a public, let's say a participant on the commission, for example, on the public side of the ledger, and that you've served 8+ years, you've been a chair, et cetera, the large size memorial brick is $200, and then the tree is $150. So all in all, I think we were able to kind of address those concerns just by the simple fact that even at the highest level of the tribute program, we're probably talking less than $500 in total.
No. Yeah, I agree with the commission. It should be those deserving. If there are lots deserving, then the seats should be selected, or none. That's what I'm a little concerned about. Oh, well, if you serve on this commission 8 years, then you're eligible. It's almost saying, well, okay, I've served on my 8 years. Where's my brick? So I like to keep it open and not say 8 years, maybe 1 year, 2 years, somebody could do something that really qualifies them for this. I don't like to put these firm numbers on the thing.
Well,
That's only eligibility, right, Joe? I mean, it just means you're eligible. It doesn't mean that somebody's going to nominate you. So,
but I don't know, what if somebody does something fantastic in 2 years on their own? I don't know. I hate to say, well, you got to wait 6 years and then we'll talk about it.
Well, the city council's point, and the mayor reiterated this at the meeting this past Monday, that there are still vehicles out there to recognize people regardless of their historic preservation involvement. That's a proclamation, some type of identification at a city council meeting, something in the Wildwood Gazette, et cetera. So there's other options. Again, the origin of this was Lisa Kelp and the tragic accident she had and her passing unexpectedly. And again, we were just looking to do something for her, and it kind of grew out from that discussion. So I think at the end of the day, I think City Council is mirroring what you're all saying. Let's see if it works, and if we see some flaws or if there's some better ways to do things, we'll change it as we go.
sounds reasonable.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I was going to conclude with one more item and then finish up the work program.
Okay.
We are hoping by July, since we have a pretty lengthy agenda for June already, to have our first training session. We're not sure who that is. I was hoping it would be Dennis Hogan with the St. Louis County Department of Parks and Recreation. who knows the history of the Merrimack River Valley probably as good as anyone I know. But there seems to be some conflicts with his schedule. So we're running a little behind, but we'll have somebody for July so we can begin that training sequence, which means we'll probably have several more between now and the end of year. So my apologies on that. Mr. Chair, that's the work program. Mr. Newberry and I are available for any comments or questions. Thank you.
Any other comments, anybody? I happen to been riding on Atherton, and I was, for some reason, I was saying, man, I hope I see that sign up, and we're not going to see that sign up for a little bit, but hopefully by the end of summer, right? Or fall sometime.
I would hope we could do something at the in September as part of the Celebrate Wildwood event. 25+1 is the theme. We were going to have a grand celebration for the 25th anniversary. COVID-19 kind of stepped in and said, you're not. So we're calling it 25+1.
Okay. Sounds good. And that's leads us right to the next item. Discussion of the points of interest map. Nice segue, Joe.
Thank you.
Did you plan that? I would expect that.
No. Because obviously I was hoping you'd actually have the 5 descriptions of the points of interest map in hand, and you don't.
Okay.
My apologies. As you know, the 5th and final chapter of the book was completed by Ms. von Gruben. It's been edited by the commission and it is ready for publication. So what you're missing right now is the incorporation chapter, which was also semi-promised for tonight, as well as the points of interest map. You will have the incorporation chapter before the next meeting. I'm going to probably send it out separately, not part of the packet, so you can have a little more time to review it and provide comments regarding it. It's a collective effort of the Department of Planning and Parks and several of the key members that participated in the incorporation. I thought it appropriate to ask them to provide some insights since they were so involved in it from the onset with the state's plan to create an outer belt on Route 109 to the day of the election and then on and beyond. So they're running behind. It's my goal to get them to you. So I just wanted to give you an update if you're wondering. Thank you.
Sounds good. So we'll see that next time.
You'll definitely see the incorporation chapter in about a week to 10 days. And then you'll have at least a few weeks to review it before we talk about it at the next meeting. That's part of that kind of large agenda. The points of interest. We're thinking we're going to hire a planner here very shortly, which will help with our short staffing. So the points of interest map may be the last item, but as you know, it's not part of the history book. So I feel like we've got a little more time there. Thank you.
So we got a lot of homework to do before the next meeting, everybody. So get ready just in time for summer. I took my vacation last week, so I got plenty of time. Okay, so that's about it. Any other matters for consideration, Joe, that you have, or Travis? Anybody?
Have a nice Memorial Day weekend.
It's still bike month, so get out and ride your bike.
I just want to thank Joe for suggesting homework. You know, Joe, I'm a teacher and tomorrow is my last day of class. I was not in need of any homework for the summer. Thank you.
By the way, we do have a number of veterans on our screen tonight, and to them, I know Memorial Day is a special time, so thank you both, and others if I don't know your background.
Okay, I'll entertain them.
You need a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I was going to ask for a motion. Jim and Dan seconded it, and there's a plane going over Chris's head, or right through his head. Okay, so all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks everybody for attending, and have a great Memorial Day and a weekend, and be safe.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thanks.
Thank you all
Thanks,
very
everyone.
much.